Good evening, everyone. We are live. Welcome to TRH, the Reconnection Hour by Mr. Perfect. I'm Terry, founder and CEO of Mr. Perfect. What is Mr. Perfect for the people that don't know? Well, we're a grassroots charity that predominantly brings men together at barbecues in parks across Australia to create community and connection. However, we are more than a barbecue. Online, in recent times, we have provided support, information, and resources for the good of men's health. So what's TRH? Well, we generally chat to health professionals and other people doing incredible things in the world of connection and men's health. A little bit of a disclaimer. I always say, look, we may discuss mental health. There's normally nothing too triggering, but if there is, just be aware that we may discuss some things that might be a bit intense for people. We don't normally, but who knows? How's our week been in the Mr. Perfect world? Well, we had our board meeting, our kind of bi-monthly board meeting on Tuesday, which was really good. Chance to see all the guys before Christmas. Lots of stuff happening, changing, growth, you name it, all sorts of things happening with us. So really pumped to see what early next year will bring. There'll be a few changes, lots of new barbecues popping up all over this month. We've actually got 14, I think, running this Sunday, which is incredible, all across the country. So in total, I think we've got 35 now that run each month. So it's getting to that point now where we definitely need all hands on deck and other people helping us and volunteers and everything. So we're going to use a bit of tech and automation to help us. I love a bit of that. So I'm just implementing some of that at the moment without losing our personal touch to what we do at barbecues and everything else we offer. So probably fairly apt tonight because I am speaking tonight on TRH with Dr. David Anthony from Mantle. He is an endorsed psychologist with over 15 years experience across a number of sectors: corporate, government, sport, clinical, forensic, defense, and academic environments. That's a mouthful. And he's passionate about changing the way men engage in therapy and improving their quality of life. And what I really liked when I read his bio was that he does it in an identifiable and relatable way, which I thought was great. Real simple way to put it. And I think guys particularly need that relatable therapy or connection. So it's amazing. But in recent years, he's co-founded Mantle, which we'll talk a bit about as well later tonight, which is a psychology telehealth platform for men. So I will wait no longer. Good evening, Dave. How you going?
Good. Thank you, Terry. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, mate.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I was just thinking the other day how we met, or at least how we first spoke. We haven't met in person yet, but I think it was through another psychologist I know, Dave, the other Dave.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there we go. Yeah, Dave B. And he spoke ever so highly of you when we first talked. And obviously we had a good chat about all things mental health, psychology, tech in mental health, I think, on the phone. And there's a lot going on in your world at the moment. So it's great to get you on and have a chat. So look, what I normally do in this format, first things I ask are, tell us a little bit about you and your background. You can be you can go as deep or as gory as you want, or you can keep it high level and let us know, your background, how you grew up, where you grew up, and eventually how you got into psychology.
Yeah, sure, mate. Look, and I must say, when Dave linked us up, Dave B linked us up, he said lots of nice things about you as well.
Yeah. So he doesn't know me well enough then.
Yeah. So look, from my background, I'm 42. I grew up in Brizzy, on the south side of Brizzy, a little suburb called Balmoral. Changed a fair bit compared to what it was when I grew up, but yeah, I currently live on the Sunshine Coast. I'm married to the love of my life, Han, who I enjoy every aspect of life with. We've got a chocolate lab called Lani. For those of you that might have seen a little bit of stuff on LinkedIn, you've probably seen Lani make a few appearances on there with some of our posts. When I think about my life growing up, I won't go into too much details. I sucked at school, just didn't enjoy it, didn't see the point, but loved my sport. So I joined surf lifesaving when I was 8. I started playing Aussie rules footy, which was a bit weird for a bloke growing up in Brizzy, or a boy growing up in Brizzy. But bucked the trend and started playing footy when I was 6. And, I guess in terms of formative experiences, both those things really, I think about it looking back on it now with your stereotypical male sort of environments, as you'd sort of hear about the stereotypical Australian male, both those environments were very much like that. We weren't allowed to cry in the surf club. If we did, we were either sort of clipped around the ear or mocked or something like that. So, I smile a little bit about it now, but it was, it was a real challenge. I wouldn't change any of that in terms of the experiences more broadly, but, I guess as I've matured and I look back on some of that, I can see how, whilst beneficial was probably how it was a little bit damaging as well. I fell out of school. I scraped through grade 12, ended up at TAFE. Mum encouraged me to do a structural drafting apprenticeship, so drawing steel, and kind of sounded good at the time, so I did it. I ended up falling into the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. So my boss at the time said, "Why don't you do this personal development program?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, give me a couple of weeks off work." So I went and did that, and that was where I got exposed to psychology. To be honest, I couldn't have told you what a psychologist did. It wasn't something that we had at school in the 90s, which is crazy to think about. We were working in that program with a couple of psychologists, and I was really interested in what it was about. Got me interested in this notion of why we do what we do, and really reinforced this notion of looking for ways to live a more meaningful and enjoyable life. So I was putting a lot of weight on psychology there, but I sort of finished the cadetship. I had another couple of years left on that, and I continued on with the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards and stuck around doing their leadership as a part of their leadership team. Got to work with those psychologists a little bit more and ended up going back to uni to study psych after a year sort of overseas traveling, doing what you might call a bit of a gap year, working in the States, then heading over to Europe and doing the backpacker thing there. So that's how I ended up in psychology, I guess. I started at QUT, did my undergrad and honours or fourth year there, and then decided to enlist in the army. And I'd been interested in it for a long time, but I wasn't keen to leave footy and surf club and all that sort of stuff when I was 18 coming out of school. It probably would have been better for me. But I sort of got to a stage where I was happy with what I'd done with footy, happy with what I'd done with lifesaving. I was sort of at a stage where, I'm ready to look at the army. And luckily enough, there was an opportunity to go in as a psychologist, sort of an intern and do my registration in there. So during uni, worked as a lifeguard over at Stratty, North Stradbroke Island, for those who don't know it. So great experience, a lot of time on the beach, really sort of allowed me to live my passion of surfing in and around work. And that was probably the thing that got me through uni. And then, when I enlisted in the army, got to move around to a few different places around Australia and do psychology in an environment that was really unique and incredibly challenging, but rewarding at the same time. Wanted more. Weirdly,
that's amazing. I was just thinking about, as you're talking, I was like, wow. So the thing for me I was going to ask about was the, I guess, military. Were you thinking, oh, this is kind of like a manly, masculine environment thing that did you see it as something like that as why you wanted to get into it, or was it more to serve, or was it to do something for your country, say, or did you have any higher sort of aspirations with it, or
Good question, Terry. I think at the time there'd always been this desire to serve, and my parents didn't, but sort of further back in up the family tree, there was some service history there. But it was more, to be honest, it was more the environment that attracted me. So we think about those experiences in surf lifesaving and footy and sort of that team environment. I think that was one of the things that I was really interested in as well. And if I look back on what I've done in my career, it's always about this desire to learn, always about this opportunity to, how can I extend myself or put myself in situations that are unfamiliar to me as a means to be challenged and learn a little bit more about myself or what it is that I'm doing, my craft, if you like. And I saw the Army as an option where I could marry something, a couple of different things that I've been wanting to do in psychology and service, and hadn't had the opportunity previously, or wasn't ready for the opportunity previously.
And how hard was it? Because I was thinking about a normal psychology session now that I've been to and I've experienced and friends have, and it's a lot more, I guess, talked about and our experiences in those sessions. What was it like in the military with soldiers? Like, were you kind of thrust upon them and they were told you have to go and see this guy, or did they come to you willingly, or how did it work?
Made a mix of everything, a mix of all those things. So, if we know one thing about psychology and whether we talk about men specific or or more generally, is it's not going to be worthwhile if you're forced to be there. That was I guess one aspect of our role. Like, my first posting was down at the Army Recruit Training Centre in Wagga, or at Kapuka, and part of our psych role there, the psych team's role there, was to sort of conduct to identify whether recruits were suitable to continue in training if they were experiencing difficulty. So, there was this pull between, them having to come and see a psychologist and maybe wanting to get out because they realised or the expectations weren't accurate, or it was they were having a hard time and they were looking for additional strategies to try and get through the training because that's something that they really wanted. And I think, that experience, it was such a great place to start my Army psychology career because it gave me this sort of understanding of how soldiers are trained in those early stages, and gave me exposure to, a range of professionals, officers and soldiers that, across a diverse range of corps, that really sort of set me up to improve my understanding of how to best work with these sort of groups. And moving on and having the opportunity to work on operations in the Middle East and also in Asia and Timor, those sort of places, is whilst we're back home, we sometimes got these people being forced to come and see us because they weren't performing, or something was going on, and their superiors wanted sort of some additional information. But the most rewarding thing was being able to work with our soldiers, defence personnel and ops to assist them in doing their job for real. And that's why people enlist. To have that opportunity and see things like post-traumatic growth occur, even in the days and months following sort of those challenges, mate, it was the most rewarding experience of my life professionally. Yeah.
Because I think my assumption, not knowing too much about that world, is we only see obviously what the media might portray or what comes out of being in the military, and it's PTSD and all the other things that have occurred that they might have seen or been experienced to, or had experiences of. So it's refreshing to hear you say it sounds like that isn't the only case. Like, there are people, they clearly employ people to support people while they're in the Army. So yeah, it's when you actually hear it like that, it's the only thing we see, right? We see PTSD, and that's kind of it. That's kind of we're portrayed to the outside world. How did you then transition from there to into sort of, did you go from there to organizational psychology in the corporate world or not, or what was your kind of next section there?
Yeah, mate, great question, and I'll circle back on the army stuff in a little while, but because I think it actually links in quite well with why we started Mantle, but especially that exposure and working with sort of a largely male population in the army as well. But I went from, I was in a position after 4 years in where I could have taken a posting back to another sort of training establishment, or I was exploring the opportunity again, coming from not being a student at school, like hating study, to now sort of being in this place where I wanted to learn more. I wanted to find out, the theories behind what it was that I was doing from a performance perspective. I had the opportunity to go back and do a master's of sport and exercise psychology. So I jumped out of full-time service and transferred to reserves, and I went back to do a master of sport and exercise psych at the University of Queensland, full-time. So that was driven by this desire, one, to learn, but two, to sort of marry up what I'd seen or what I'd experienced from a performance perspective, noting that, when we talk about psychology traditionally, back to that thing about, your comments about PTSD, it's usually how do we get the unwell back to a level of functioning. But I'd also had the experience and, growing up playing different sports and being involved in different sports, and this notion of performance is, well, what do we do with all these psychological theories that we know are great and effective and useful when applied right, to move people from performing well to enhancing their performance further. And so, that's how I ended up sort of this, how I ended up doing my master's, and the willing or the desire to have a look at sport and exercise psych. And funnily enough, I swore probably end of first year of masters I wasn't going to do any more study. And then, in my second year of masters, one of my supervisors said, "Oh, look, there's a scholarship available over in WA. It's looking at mental toughness, and the West Coast Eagles are keen to pay some of the top up, so you'll be able to do some research with them." And I went, well, I've kind of wanted to live in Perth, and I was trying to angle my army career that way, and it didn't work out. So, when this opportunity came up, it was sort of like, yeah, right, okay, let's have a look at it. So I applied, and I was lucky enough to get the gig. So I finished the masters at UQ. Had an opportunity to deploy overseas with Army again on a contract, like a CFTS contract. So, just putting the uniform back on for 6 months. And then when I got back in June, I moved to WA to do the PhD thing. Again, not considering myself academic.
That's great. I don't know how I deal with full-time study at all. Like, I thought I was quite academic, and I think maybe I've been away from it so long now that I've rebirthed that in myself now. I've actually thought about, in the most hectic times of my life now, taking on my extra study to do things because I want to learn more about, it might not be psychology, but it might be something related to that and the things I've learned over probably the last 6 years. So, no, good on you. And that obviously would have been, well, I guess I'm more interested to know then, how did you deal with all the things you would have seen her dealt with at work, maybe when you were deployed? How were you dealing with your own mental health during that time, and how do you deal with it now? Like, what do you do when you need support, help, or is it sport that works for you, or study, or what is it?
Good question. I laugh because there's still this conditioned response about study. No, you can't do it. But yeah. I'm working hard to change that. But for me, physical activity, whether it be surfing, getting out in nature, yoga, running, gym. There's various sort of physical activity things that I do, and I get satisfaction out of those. But it wasn't until probably a couple of years after I after my last deployment that I started to struggle a little bit psychologically when I was doing my PhD, and I'm really lucky that I have my wife Han. She decided to move to Perth with me, which was I'm pretty thankful for. Things have worked out, which is even better. But using her to assist me in sort of processing some of the anxiety, I guess the residual anxiety that came with hearing so many stories of challenge and exposure to different sorts of trauma was it has an effect. So relying on her to assist me to process that stuff, and also engaging in psych support myself. So that wasn't something that I did till a couple of years after my service, and I thought, I'm being a bit of a hypocrite if I'm up there talking to people about the importance of engaging in psych support when it's needed, and they're not walking the talk myself. And it was the best thing I could have done. It allowed me to sort of start processing some of that stuff that is part of my experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or that I'm broken. It just means that I see the world differently. And that that was a really positive turning point for me personally.
And it's absurd to think now the way we just to hear you say that, like everything you told me, first of all, and all the active things you've been doing, and being successful, and it's sounding like on the surface that sounds like you would be rock solid, in every possible way, whether it's mentally, physically, you name it. And it's absurd to think now, and I'm glad it's different, that we can talk more openly and acceptingly about people who we deem to have it all and have it together, hence the Mr. Perfect thing, and hence what you're doing with Mantle, that actually need that as well. Because I was just speaking with last week or the week before with a guy who runs a similar thing to what we do, and I'm listening to him as he's talking. I went, wow, he achieved all this stuff. He owns all these things right now. He's running an organization which is like national, about to go international. And yeah, he kind of just dropped into the conversation. Oh yeah, and I see my counselor, eczema. And I thought, wow, and that just made me go, just woke up for a minute and went, yeah, the assumption that counseling should be either only when you hit crisis point or trauma is exactly what I thought. I was never educated around it. And I don't know if you were when you're saying growing up. We were never told as boys that was even an option. Yet I would even so much as graze my arm, and my mum would have me on to the doctor in half a second. Yeah, we never once addressed it. And I didn't know, even at 29, when I first went to the doctor about my GP. Still wasn't really explained what a counsellor, psychologist did, what the difference was, what the psychiatrist was going to do that he was sending me to. Nothing. It's actually incredible. So no, it's refreshing to hear that it can be talked about openly, but also that even then you knew that was probably a thing you needed to do, which I think is probably leads into my next kind of question about men generally and our approach now to therapy, counselling. Have you seen, or if you are, or I believe you are, still doing some clinical work, have you, even with Mantle, what's the changes you've seen in, say, decade, 15 years in the way guys approach therapy now? Maybe like in a session, or how they go about it to get to you. Like that's always the hard part, right? How do they actually come to that point to come?
Yeah, it's some really good points there, Terry. And I think one of the, for me, we look at I reflect on my experience, sort of, starting army in the mid 2000s, and now where we are in November of 2020. This process or this perspective of change in environments that have been, that traditional male bastion or your stereotypical male bastion has been refreshing. I'll admit I'm a bit of an optimist, and maybe I look at it as a bit over glass half full when people may see it differently. And obviously, it's important to acknowledge that we still need to work on the challenging suicide rate that we're seeing in Australia with Australian men. But what we're seeing a shift in the needle is the reality that these services can be used from an early intervention and prevention perspective, like we use other health services. And when we think about what works for blokes, we acknowledge that some of the traditional stuff doesn't. And I think, for me, that was sort of made pretty clear to me when I was working predominantly with males in Army, and then when I sort of transitioned into this, sports-oriented environment and seeing how men engage in those sort of environments really sort of reiterated that, and Zach Seidler has been doing some great work in identifying, how men require something different in therapy. And that's what we've built Mantle around, is this notion that, the way that we as men engage needs to be different. There should be an increased focus on this, behavioural activation, because we like to be active, but also this notion of, sense of control. And that's not controlling the session, but it's this notion of autonomy. So how do I start to wrestle some of the direction of my life back when, I've been directionless for an extended period. And for me, it was also looking about how do we make it easier for men to engage. And so if I think about the three, our goal at Mantle is, how do we help men become better fathers, brothers, sons, mates, and partners? And also, how do we make it easier for them to use the service? So that's why we went down this telehealth path. And, with this whole pandemic thing, it sort of enhanced the process and the acceptance of use of that. But we also acknowledged that we needed to make sure our psychs had the training that would allow them to better, engage with men to change that. We look at a 43% dropout after the first session because men didn't get what they got, didn't meet their expectations. And so, for us, we were looking at creating this service and building this service that changed those sort of perspectives, I suppose, or changed those experiences more so. Mm. And so if you go back to your first question about connection, like what is it that men need? Well, I think they need to feel, like we all do, we need to feel safe. If we want to be able to talk openly about our experiences, then it's a great opportunity is to put them somewhere where they feel a little bit more safe than a psychologist's room, right? So why not somewhere in their house or somewhere close by where they can do that? The second is they need a sense of, need to feel like they have a sense of control or understanding of where the session's going, as opposed to sort of, talking about, I'm going to say this tongue in cheek, rainbows and lollipops. So, how do we make it meaningful for them and give them a sense of understanding that, they have a choice in where the therapy goes and what it is that they want to talk about, as opposed to, going all the way back to what happened when I was 7 years old at primary school. So, for me, one of the really heartening things to see is when this stuff is done well, we see men, we see blokes, Australian blokes sticking with therapy, and we're 6 weeks in since the launch of Mantle, and we've already seen really positive changes in some of those sort of retention rates, if you like, with blokes sticking with the process of psych support.
There's so much there that I was just thinking, so many things to sort of talk about in more detail. Yeah, exactly. We could talk literally for hours about them. But firstly, before I ask you more about, I want to know more about Mantle specifically and how it works. The fact that you mentioned about more our view of what psychology is or what a psychology session is. So yes, when I first went, it was what I thought it was. the first couple of sessions because it was in a closed room. It felt, it was hard to kind of get what I wanted to say out there. I definitely wasn't saying everything I should have said, like it was a lot more closed off. But once a few sessions in, it broke down, and 3.5 years later with my current psychologist, incredible. But I always used to think, and this is psychological, right, in my head, if he couldn't see me physically at the clinic where it was, then we couldn't talk. So I had to cancel my session, or if I was away, or why did we think that was a thing? It's so strange to see that behavior now that, oh no, we'll miss that now. So now I won't see you for 2 months because I'm on holiday, or I'm going, it's actually insane to think that now that has changed so quickly. But when it did that, mine wasn't forced by COVID. Mine now, I use telehealth every session I do because it was forced by my psychologist moving to Melbourne. So he moved to Melbourne, and I went,
it's a bit rude.
Shit, what am I going to do? Yeah, exactly. I can remember the last session, I was like, oh no, I was trying to put a brave face on it. I was like, what am I going to do? And this is my true story. He said, well, there's other people here that would be great to see you. And I was like, no chance. I'm not going through this all again. He goes, no, this person's great, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure they were. Thankfully, as sort of serendipity would have it, he said, I wasn't planning on doing some more clinical stuff, but I am going to now. Do you want to catch up on the over telehealth? And I said, I don't know about that. Like, it took me forever to suddenly go, all right, let's give this a go. And this almost happened just before COVID, literally just before COVID. Yeah. So we did the first one, and then I went, what? Why did we never do this before? Yes, it was important we met first couple. Absolutely, I agreed with that. We both agreed on that. But I said, I've just gone upstairs at my work to a private room. It was quiet. It was private. Door was slightly locked. Earphones on, everything. We've just sat there. Within 5 minutes, I'd forgotten it was even. We were talking like that. It was, and I hadn't had to miss any travel to go to work. I hadn't had to have any awkward conversations with people. I hadn't had to do any. It just blew me away. I said, I don't know why we didn't do this before. And then COVID happened, and then now it's imperative, I guess, for a lot of people. So that was my personal experience. The second thing I was going to say was, yes, you also mentioned, let's go back to the 7-year-old thing. Again, in my head, that's almost exactly what I thought this was supposed to be about. We just go over and over again, and then go back again and back again. That's what I thought it was about. And my psychologist said, if you want to do that, that is fine. He said, but he was quite blunt about it. He said, that's not going to be helpful long term. That's not my goal. So for about a year, we went around in the circle, and then something happened, a bit of a shift where he was a bit more blunt with me and sort of expected more from me. And then it just shifted, and we don't talk about the stuff that was traumatic now because we've moved so far forward that it's got to a point where he's now like, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think that you're, this is like cured. He said, we're all a work in progress. Like you're in a great spot. Now we can work out what you're doing, and we do more of it. And, we reinforce those behaviors. So it was amazing to me thinking, took, a couple of years. I think that's my point to anyone listening or people who are listening. Do not expect, I say this all the time, that 2 or 3 sessions in, this is what you're suddenly going to get from it. Like this was 2 years of, at least, of that work and doing other things and seeing a GP and seeing a psychiatrist originally and working on myself. It is hard work, but there's support there and there's resources. So I guess that's like just my rant, my statement. I want to know more about Mantle specifically, because obviously I've used a telehealth, so I used a couple actually in different formats for men's health. Still not a massive user of them, and I know quite a bit about them. So tell us about Mantle, what it is. Well, you pretty much said what it came about, but maybe a little bit more depth and how it works.
Yeah, sure. And mate, look, thanks for sharing your own experiences there as well, because I think part of this process is obviously normalizing what a psychology session might look like, and what is the reality around engaging, and whilst we're all different, I think it's really important to highlight that the only way you're going to find out how it works for you is by giving it a go, and there's no, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that, and why do men probably avoid it in the past is we can talk about stigma, we can talk about the perception of masculinity and that being somewhat misguided, and again, they're probably conversations for another time. But for me, it's very much about this notion of we never stop growing, and life never stops changing. As much as we might want it to at times, the more we can work on better understanding ourselves in the context in which we live, then the better place will be. The better place will be to live one of those meaningful and enjoyable lives, noting that we'll still experience difficulty, but we can move through that stuff more effectively when we have those strategies and skills, and we're looking for ways to build those. Mantle. We worked on it for sort of the concept for about 18 months with my co-founders, Dave Burrows, Dave B, and Lukey Foster as well. And I'd met both of those blokes as part of my army service. Dave was doing a little bit of reserve work as a reserve psychologist, and Luke was full time as well for a number of years as a psych. So they threw this idea at me about, well, we want to create this virtual or telehealth men's mental health service, but we want to do it differently. We want to create something that's specific for males, because that's where we see an inherent need, and we want to make sure that it has a positive effect. And for me, reflecting on the experiences that I've had both personally and professionally, it was like, yeah, we need that. Our Australian males need that. So let's look for ways to start to set this up. And so we played around with a few different platforms, a few different concepts. We got, we went out and sort of pitched this idea to a few people, got some feedback from those that have worked in various health fields over time, and created a platform that is essentially using an established telehealth service called CoView. But the front end sort of landing page, when we talked about the web page, we spent a whole lot of time designing that to be, to be male oriented, and that for us is about the user experience. How do we make this, back to your point about making things accessible and limiting sort of some of those barriers to treatment, like going and seeing a GP and sitting in waiting rooms and travelling and taking time out of work or family. How do we limit that to ensure that we're getting blokes to the service as quickly as possible at a time and a place that suits them? And so that was sort of how we built our landing page with that in mind. The other really important piece of the puzzle was noting that our clients are one part of the experience. How do we make sure our psychs, who are providing the services, are one, top class, are experienced with men, and they come from a range of sort of either sport or defence or organisational backgrounds, so sort of environments that there's a large population of males, and they go through the training program that's designed as a refresher and onboarding program to make sure that they have an understanding of what the latest research says about how to best engage men and keep men engaged in therapy. So that's the premise. We talk about offering, sort of clinical services, which is your more, if you like, traditional. But we also talk about, look, if you want to just focus on one specific issue, then you can come to us and talk about that. If it's work performance, if it's sport performance, if it's, a certain aspect of life, whether it be relationship with a significant other or something else going on for you, then we can focus purely on that, and we'll aim to get it addressed as quickly as and efficiently as possible in a way that suits you. So for us,
sorry, interrupt. I thought it was really important, because before you tell me how physically it works, you said about the training aspects of dealing with men, I guess, right? I was listening to a podcast recently with a well-known psychologist, and he was talking to another psychologist about, they said, both of them went, yeah, we don't actually remember when we went through psychology training or anything being, maybe not gender specific, but how to deal with, and I sat there and I thought, hold on a minute, these guys are both, top of their field, whatever it may be. And they've obviously had to just keep on top of, probably weekly now, research and studies and everything proactively themselves, because it wasn't going to be taught by their association or their CPD provider or whatever it was. Once a year you just do a course and then hey ho, we're good to go. And they pretty much made the point that they kind of had to not relearn but overlearn consistently, and always need to learn and research and keep up to date, because the way we approach it with, you can't take this cookie cut thing and just go, oh, okay, this is what we used and this is going to work now, especially right now. That blew me away when they actually mentioned, when I studies, this was how it went. I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's outrageous, Terry. It's the notion of working in an applied environment to develop, to have to develop some of these skills and this awareness is like, it's probably there's a bit missing there, from the sort of the training process, I guess. And for us, it was like, all right, so we'll get these psychs. We know are good, are valued in the environments that we're interested, or the demographic that we're interested in targeting. But we're also going to give them the option to engage in regular professional development. So, every 4 to 6 weeks, we've got some stuff that opportunities for them to engage in stuff that relates to how to best engage men and keep men engaged in therapy. So for us, that's something that's necessary, because one, things change a little bit, but two, when you're a psych and you're just working with one other person a fair bit of your day, you're not getting the opportunity to build that connection that allows you an opportunity to improve and even check in and normalize some of those experiences. And to be honest, probably process some of the challenges you're dealing with yourself.
Absolutely. And I guess now more than ever, I've got friends who are working the day job, healthcare professionals, doctors, psychologists. And when they're sort of a bit more candid with me, and I ask them how they're going right now, what's sort of going on in their worlds, and the majority are saying it's tough. Like, they're seeing all day, they're in demand, be it on telehealth or in person or not. Some are working part-time, but almost under pressure, like, to go back because the books at their practices are just overflowing. And it's almost, they feel this pressure and they're working really hard. And if they're on telehealth, they're doing that all day in front of their screen, which is clearly going to be a little bit exhausting. Yet, where do they then get the time outside of this to learn more about, be it specifically if they're seeing men or women or whatever it might be? And you pile that on, and it's a tricky, complex scenario. So it's great that I love the specific nature of what you're doing. So, but I guess I was thinking about the logistics of it. Say I want to see someone, or next week or whatever it may be. What's my next step with Mantle? How do I go about it? Like, walk me through kind of the process.
Yeah. So sorry, there was a bit of a delay there. For first and foremost, you go to www.mantlehealth, M-A-N-T-L-E, health.com.au, and you can have a look at, some of the background to Mantle. There's a couple of Book Now buttons on there. So you click on one of those Book Now buttons. There's information about sort of two services, the clinical services and the coaching, performance coaching services that we offer. Doesn't matter which one you're interested in. Go through, have a look if you like at the psychs that you might be able to see. And I would say that the reason that we've got the psychs on board that we do have on board is because regardless of who you see at Mantle, we're confident that they'll be able to provide the services that give you the best opportunity to improve and maintain your mental health. Essentially, you can pick a specific psych after you've had a look at their short bios, or you can just say next available and book in at a time that suits you. If you wanted to use a mental health care plan, so you can get additional support through Medicare, and we know that the government's recently announced up to 20 rebated sessions for all Australians. in a calendar year. So if you wanted to do that, you can go and see a GP or a GP and ask for a mental health care plan, talk about why you'd want to see a psych, and they'll write you on one of those. And you can provide that to us when you book. Or if you're unsure where to go, we can help you identify how to best get a mental health care plan. Our practice management and our team working at the moment will point you in the right direction as to where you can best get one of those, or even using a telehealth service such as Phoenix Telehealth. They can also do one, provide a mental health care plan in this sort of environment as well. So you then essentially get an email with a link. You find us, when it's coming time for your appointment, you find a place where you're comfortable, grab yourself a glass of water, put the headphones in if you want, and your therapist will connect with you, and you'll crack on from there.
Amazing. And it sounds like the accessible nature of that. I know we talked about accessibility, and I found it when I've done telehealth. I just couldn't recommend it more, especially if you are in your employment, you're at work, you're already a little bit under the pump at the moment, and having time to do it and everything else. Like the mental block I had on what I thought it would be and what it actually was way far apart. So 6 weeks in, you said 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
What have you seen? What's like the learnings so far from it?
Yeah, great question, Terry. So the learnings for me are that we continually need to look at ways to improve our systems, both for our psychologists in terms of usability, but also for our clients. How do we streamline that process? Because we can assist you in getting a mental health care plan, but there's a step there that is required. So we're looking for ways to again, sort of cut down some of those steps, and that may be setting up direct contact with some GP clinics to smooth that process out. We're still working sort of on some of that. The other really positive learning, and I mentioned it earlier, is what we're seeing is we're seeing the clients that have engaged with us for a minimum of 3+ sessions. And we talk about sort of this brief intervention approach may only require a couple of sessions, but at the same time we're not losing anyone. Well, I shouldn't say losing, but we're not seeing anyone drop out after that first session. And I think for us is really heartening, because it's sort of flying in the face of some of that, those research findings previously. What are the other learnings? Look, we need to continually look at how we grow to service the need. But in doing that, we're drawing on some of those sort of professional resources, and and looking at how we set up also relationships with the likes of Mr. Perfect and a few of those other kind of social connection environments, those grassroots environments, as a means to help men when they might need something more. Get access to these services, these professional services that can also help.
Amazing. And my question is going to be then, if it's only 6 weeks in, but what's not like sort of specific presentations you're seeing, but what have you learned from the guys coming to you and talking to you? What are the struggles or the challenges they're having, or what are the wins they're having as well? So on the optimistic side and the proactive side you're working on, what have you found is working?
This is going to this might not come across right, but I'll try and say it as I can. The process of engaging is what's working. And I don't mean to simplify that. I'm not meaning to be sort of simplistic or dismissive, but if we think about what causes distress, it's usually when there's some sort of blockage or some sort of challenge with what it is that we're ruminating about or we're stuck on. And the best thing to start you'll give your brain the opportunity to move through that experience, back to personal experience, I suppose, as well as what I've learned as a psychologist is, starting the process of talking about that, getting it out of your head, will start the process of change, and allow you an opportunity to move towards better understanding what that means for you, and essentially what might need to change, or what you might need to change in terms of what you're doing to improve your quality of life and your general well-being. So the process of engagement.
And I guess on that note, what would I think I normally ask this question, sometimes I forget to ask it for everyone, but what would your advice generally be, or suggestions to men who are lacking connection right now, or, you've already kind of mentioned some things that I guess work for you, or things you probably do that help, but what would your general advice to men be if they're seeking connection right now?
Oh yeah, like it's the $1 million question. If something's not working, like if we go back to the comment I made earlier about this thing called life, and how we, this year especially, I don't know how many times that's been said, but our life and the way we live is constantly changing, and the challenges personally are thrown at you at every different way and any different day. So it's about identifying when taking the time to identify what matters to you most currently, according to what's most important in your world, and figuring out how to best manage that. If something's not working, get a little bit vulnerable and ask the questions that the people around you, those close to you, as a means to find out what it is that you might need to do to increase that connection. There's, as you can attest, Terry, there's a whole heap of sort of opportunities for blokes to connect, whether it be virtually, whether it be, now that we're getting out of the restrictions, getting back into the barbecues and those other sort of events socially that give us an opportunity to connect. But if that's not working, again, look for something else. Don't sort of take the back seat and say, I don't know what to do here. As long as you're trying and you're looking for opportunities or options, that will put you in a good place to progress.
I love that you said that, because I definitely couldn't add or make that any better, because you said at the start that you're generally an optimist. And I was like, damn, because I wish I was one. I'm definitely not one. I start from the pessimist and I work my way up, but I used to not see that as a massive problem. This is part of my whole psychology journey as well. I now accept that and I work with it. Like, that's I know I'm going to start probably from a pessimistic view, maybe, and then work my way upwards. Like so what you just said then is exactly what we've just been talking about. It's not overnight you're going to change your psychology on things and you're going to be the most happy, content, productive person in the world. However, the bit of me that is the optimist, and it's always sparked by when I speak to people like yourself, or we talk about these subjects, there is so much out there. People say to me, someone made a comment the other day, I wasn't sure if it was on our socials or somewhere else. I thought, I'm not going to be Mr. Nice. I will be Mr. Nice Guy, but I'm going to say what I think. And I said, actually, I understand you're saying there's nothing out there for men. Like, that was kind of their statement. And I said, actually, without knowing your situation, just, politely, I've mapped out the sector. There is hundreds of opportunities, groups, initiatives, whether it be in face or online, not necessarily things you have to pay for. There are so many things. I think we're in such a bit of a state of confusion sometimes, especially right now, and in a blur, that we can't see that. We can't see that sometimes the simple option and the simple thing of trying different things and doing things. We don't have to do things we don't particularly love, like turning up at a barbecue in a park, or is pretty inclusive and will be for a lot of people. I've seen groups like the Man Walk, which I absolutely love, and I've been chatting to the founder of that recently. It's a walk. Like, they haven't tried to reinvent, but it works, and it's in almost 100 places across the country, and now going back. that for me is what the little spark will start changing things. If people want to get out for a walk and do things like that, and I try and think about it a lot more simply now, and tell people, and again in a polite way, but there's a lot of opportunity out there, and that's why we did on the website, like mapped it all out and put it in that directory as best we could, because we said, look, actually, try one of these. Like if you tried one, or maybe try 10 of these out of the 100 things that are on there. I really think there's a lot of people out there, one, who understand, two, who will support you. And yeah, so there is a lot of options. And be it clinically down the track telehealth, like there's a number of things you can piece together as part of your toolbox. So I'm very glad you said that. I think it was really apt as well. But I normally wrap it up by asking, where can people find out about either yourself or Mantle, or any website links you want to give us, or socials? You tell us.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. It's I mentioned it earlier. The website mantlehealth.com.au. That's MANTLE health.com.au. We've got our LinkedIn page, Mantle. Again, some posts going up there almost daily. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well, Dr. David Anthony, and throw any questions that you may have at me or at the team at Mantle, and we'll be happy to answer them. And finally, this seems a bit backwards, but we've just launched our Facebook page, Mantle. So Insta will come soon as well. But I guess there's a lot of people promoting the importance of engaging in mental health services out there, and to echo your point, Terry, is as long as we're making sure that we're trying different things, we're giving ourselves the opportunity to improve our life and move towards living a more meaningful and enjoyable life in spite of the challenges that we face. And to me, that's the best place we can be.
I agree. That's a very beautiful way to end, Dave. I really appreciate that. Appreciate your time, your knowledge. There's loads of other stuff I'm probably going to ask you about, so I'd love to get you back sometime if you'd be keen to chat in a few months' time, and we'll find out where you're at as well with Mantle. But again, thanks for your time, Dave, and I'll make sure I share all the links and everything to all the things you mentioned to our community as well.
Good man, Terry. Thank you very much for your time, mate. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Love it. Cheers, Dave. Take care.
You too.